Hey, welcome back to Everyday Economics. This is the podcast that helps you understand the economic world going on all around us. Everyday Economics is brought to you by the Center Square Newswire service. I'm Chris Krug. I'm publisher of the Center Square Newswire. Orphe Divounguy is my co-host and partner on this show. He's a PhD economist. Today is Monday, April 20th, 2026. And in this episode, we're talking about the most underappreciated variable in American housing, which is government policy. Two stories, one frame, and a takeaway you can actually use. We'll put it to the test. We put a 10-minute timer on every episode of our show, so we keep it crisp for you. Dr. O, let's get into it. Beazer Homes CEO Alan Merrill over this past week, and this is from an item that we shared with each other. Alan Merrill told Resi Club that his company pays $140,000 per new home build in government fees alone in California. That's not the cost of the house. That's the cost before construction even begins. I want you to react to that number and walk us through what's actually in that. I think that's going to shock some people when they hear that that percentage of their home is already committed to something that maybe has no material return to them and no future ROI.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a bit shocking, but for people who haven't been paying attention to the biggest cause or driver of for why builders have slowed, builder productivity has slowed so much and has lagged overall productivity over the past few decades. We are not building enough homes in America. We have a massive housing unit deficit, and the deficit is the largest in, well, yeah, of course, places where you have steep mountain regions and where you have, of course, lots of water bodies that prevent you from building. We don't build on water yet. But ultimately, right, maybe one of the biggest problems is the cost of delays, permitting delays, the cost of, all of the stuff that goes into getting prepared to build, right? I find land, I buy the land, I want to build some stuff, but I can't because there are rules,
right?
Local governments that prevent you from building multiple homes on a decent sized lot because they have minimum lot requirements, and they have minimum parking requirements, which means you can't have 2 or 3 doors because they're saying, well, there's not enough parking for 3 families to live here. Those are all rules. Oh, they even have rules around the height of buildings. What building heights you can, and so if you were able to maybe fit 3 families upwards, you can't do that because of the building rules. And so those are all restrictions to building that builders have to maneuver around, which of course raise the cost.
Well, but I was, and you're 100% right about that. But in terms of that hard cost on the front end, what Alan Merrill's talking about is impact fees, right? I mean, and these are fees that ultimately get passed on to the buyer of the home. And I mean, if you think about it, like $140,000 fee and I just did a little quick math on this, 6.3% on a 30-year mortgage is a $300,000 bill to the consumer.
Yes. And the National Association of Home Builders does a great job of kind of breaking it down, right? So going beyond just one builder and looking at actual smaller builders across America. And they break the site work, building permit fees, impact fees, water sewer fees, and inspections, architecture, engineering, right? So like all the things that go major systems, right? And then you actually add the stuff that goes into the house, right?
Yeah.
That ultimately the buyer will be able to will go in the value of that house. Yes, there are so many fees that before you even add the actual construction cost,
yes,
and the financing costs for the builder, right? And maybe the marketing for the project site, right? All of that stuff right? And the National Association of Home Builders says basically for the typical new single family home, right, at a sale price of $665,000, they're going to have in 2024, and this is from their report, they're going to have, 420 of the total cost, right? $425,000 of that 665, something like $425,000 going into construction, and everything else is just fluff.
Yeah.
Maybe not the right word.
No.
But
I mean,
yeah.
to the consumer, I think it ultimately is fluff. All right. So so we talked about California, and that's, I think some people can just sort of write that off and go, well, hey, it's California, right? If you live in California, maybe that's not your perspective. If you don't live in California, that probably is your perspective. But I want to talk to you about that I believe it was maybe on X, or it was a TikTok video that I watched where it was a realtor from New Jersey talking about like this. She's in a moment right now where it's a throwback to that FOMO period that I think we saw in the housing market in 2022, maybe that carried into 2023, where like there were bids over asking and things going on. New York City changed its tax policy. So all of a sudden, northern New Jersey is kind of on fire right now in certain markets. Talk about like sort of, governmental policy changes having a direct impact on the housing market. Are you seeing anything specific to that region where the exodus from New York City, or maybe a planned exodus from New York City, simply escaping the potential taxes that are coming the way of the middle class and the upper middle class, causing a geographic shift?
Well, migration data tends to lag, so it's very difficult to tell you whether or not it's people moving from New York City. But when you look at markets around Pennsylvania, small towns,
yeah,
right? Anything in a commuting radius, right? Up to 2 hours outside of New York City, man, by train, because you can get to Pennsylvania really quickly from New York City. Look, it's tight. Those are tight housing markets with prices rising, prices that historically had been relatively affordable.
Mm-hmm.
Prices and rents are still rising pretty rapidly there because of two factors. Well, stronger demand for housing, but ultimately the fact that there's just isn't enough supply to keep up with the steady demand for housing. The people looking for housing, relative affordability outside of the major market, right? For years and years, people couldn't afford to live in Manhattan. They worked, they commuted in. And so they had to live in places like Long Island. And now, because Long Island's gotten so expensive, again, Long Island, a place known for not building any housing, they're starting to move further and farther. They're going west. They're going to Pennsylvania. They're going further up north in New York, throughout the Buffalo Metro and Albany and all those other places, right? So yeah, of course. And we got a ton of economic research that tells us that ultimately migration decisions are based on expected income.
Mm-hmm.
Not just today's income, but what I expect. And when we say expected income, we're not just talking about your wages. We're talking about income adjusted for prices. We're talking about, overall cost of living, right? I will go to a place, and most people do this. They will go to a place where it's relatively more affordable to live than where they come from, right? And when you look at housing data, what do you find? You find that people tend to move to places where there's relatively more housing options, more housing to choose from, and places that are relatively more affordable than where they came from, right? And so some people are like, well, hold on a second. I got some people moving from, I don't know, some markets in California to some expensive market in, I don't know, Tennessee, or some expensive market in outside of the New York metro. And I say to them, when you compare, when you go beyond looking at the states and you compare the destinations, right? The pairs of places that people are choosing, they tend to choose a place that is relatively more affordable.
Right.
When you look at the California market they come from, and you look at the destination market they're going to, right? It's usually relatively more affordable than the place they come from. And so that is kind of the big economic result here. And we see it play out time and time again, right? People are going to take their overall cost of living. They're going to add to that they're going to compare those, and they're going to add to that the cost of moving, right? The cost of moving, the distance matters. Moving further away actually costs more than moving closer, right? And so you'll see that migration patterns tend to be somewhat around, people tend to move somewhat around where they come from because it's actually cheaper. This distance matters, right? And then, of course, they're going to pick the nearby market that's relatively more affordable and where their incomes adjusted for prices will go further. And so that's the general story.
Yeah, good stuff, Dr. O. Make sure you read Orphe's Everyday Economics column every Monday in the Center Square and listen to what we have to say each weekend on the Center Square Radio Hour.